Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we are talking about bands or artists that at one time in your life you couldn't understand, you couldn't get into them, but then you revisit them, and then it gels. That's right. Coming up next. Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we have an excellent show tonight. All I can say is we've got two new members to the channel, two new Patreon members. Glad to have them. We've got Dave to my right or left. I don't know where this is going to end up. This is David's first show. We're going to haze him tonight. Actually, we're not going to do anything, but it's glad to have new blood on the channel. David, welcome to the channel. Nice to see you. And we've got Dan to my other side, wherever it is. And this is his second show. And he's new to the Patreon experience and new to the Contrarians, though both of these gentlemen have probably been following the channel for a while. I want to welcome Dan to the show, to your second episode.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, tonight we are going to talk about these bands or artists, which you probably heard early on in your life, maybe, or sometime during your life, but it's taken a lot of time or some time for you to mature and appreciate them. Now, I don't know if anybody explained how many you can pick. We're just going to keep it loose, and we'll just do the show as long as we can go. And I've got a couple of mentions that I can mention that really off the top of my head, it's just like, yeah, that took me a long time. So because this is a kind of a hazing, I'm going to let David go first. And I don't know, how many do you guys have that you could talk about?
I had about 3 or 4.
Perfect.
Yeah, I got 3 for sure and 2 honorable mentions. So
all right, you guys are good. You got more than I do because I only can think of 2 artists from back in the day that took me a long time to warm up to. So we'll play it loose and David, you want to just give us, we can just keep going back and forth until we run out. We'll go about an hour. So okay. David, like I said, welcome to the show. Do you want to give us one of your examples?
Yeah, sure. My first one is Steely Dan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I'm 35, so I'm slightly younger.
Just a baby.
Yeah, so I pretty much came of age in the 90s, when I first really got into music.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my parents, they listened to Steely Dan a lot growing up. And when you're a kid, I mean, there was nothing exciting or cool about Steely Dan when I was a kid. I mean, it didn't really jump off the page at me. And looking at the posters and the album covers were interesting, but the music, I mean, it's kind of sophisticated. When you're a kid, you don't really appreciate the instrumentation and the production that went into that.
Right.
But I mean, as I got older, I started playing guitar, and then I got into it, and then I started researching who played on all those records. And when I started finding out guys like Jeff Baxter and Denny Dias and Chuck Rainey played bass on a lot of those albums, and I started to really appreciate the time and energy that went into making all that stuff sound as great as it does. So then I was able to see Steely Dan live finally about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So Walter Becker was still alive at the time. And so it was pretty cool to see them actually play, because I remember reading an interview with Walter Becker one time where he said that he could envision a future where he could see the band carrying on without him or Donald Fagen even there. So, because it was more about the concept than actual, the band.
Sounds like David, it sounds like Kiss.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So, but yeah, and obviously albums like Asia, it's considered one of the most well-produced and classic sounding albums, just the pristine sound quality. So I really I got into that. I'm really into vinyl too, so I like the vinyl pressing of that album. It's one of the better ones. But I think my favorite album that I really got into was Katie Lied from '75. I think that might be my favorite album. It rocks a little harder than Asia for me. So that's the album I really got into. But
that is my favorite. That is my favorite Steely Dan album. I think that album's great. Absolutely stunning record. So
I think the song that did it for me was probably Black Friday. So
it's great. What is my favorite track on there? God, there's so many on there. Black Friday's definitely up there, but I like the whole thing. That's the thing about that Steely Dan catalog. There's nothing really weak. If you're looking at that first period, a lot of people may think that Gaucho's a bit weaker because I think Asia probably was the peak, and then they threw in the towel after Asia, after Gaucho. But I don't know. I think Gaucho's a good album too. I don't think there's really anything bad in that whole catalog. So,
No, yeah, and I remember a few years ago I read Donald Fagen's autobiography, and
mhm,
it almost seemed like he was kind of like anti the concert experience. Like
mhm,
he kind of plays the shows kind of begrudgingly. Like he doesn't really embrace the whole performance aspect of it. But I mean, they play the songs like note for note, and it's really
yeah.
well. But he doesn't really go out of his way to put on a show to connect with the audience. It's very impersonal, but it sounds great. So the show was great. So
I mean, back in the day, like 73 or something, I mean, they barely played out.
yeah. Mhm.
Maybe they did one tour. I can't remember, but that Citizen Steely Dan box set, it's got like a live track on there. But, they hardly did it. They didn't want to tour. They're a studio
Yeah.
band,
Mhm.
Well, anyway, cool. Excellent, David. I'm with you. I dig it. But
And
I got Steely Dan I got Steely Dan though right in the beginning. But what were you going to say,
I
David?
inherited my first 3 Steely Dan records like a year ago, and I was like,
Oh, you did?
can't buy a. My uncle gave away all his vinyl,
Mhm.
and there was Can't Buy a Thrill. So you see, Aja, I thought it was Aja. So
No, it's Asia.
okay, Aja and Gaucho that you just said. So those 3 that were in the, and I was like, oh my god, I know this, I know this, I know this. So yeah,
So
loved
you
it.
hadn't really listened to any Steely Dan either? Or you
As an
had?
album, no, but I knew
Oh,
a
really?
whole bunch of songs. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
god, I know this song. I've heard these songs many times.
Mhm.
So it was like a pleasant surprise. I did not think I would know them.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
but I
Awesome.
don't have them all yet there, so
Well, you've
I
got
just discovered them.
hey. But this is why we do these type of shows, just ladies and gentlemen, is just to turn you on to stuff.
Exactly.
Everybody's story's different. David can hear one thing, Dan can hear one thing, hell, me. And your taste can change over time. And really all we're doing is trying to turn you on to music. So based on that, me yabbing and jabbing, Dan, give us something. Give us a band or an artist that
All right, so this
matured
is
over
going to
time.
be my how immature I was back then, because the title was band that took you a long time to mature. So let's go back to high school, probably 85, 86-ish.
Mhm.
And we were all into hair metal, hard rock. That was my friends. And one time, my friend of mine came to school with a Blue Oyster Cult T-shirt. But us being immature, like we are, what did we? Well, my friend was the one who goes da 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 da. And I don't know if you know what that exactly I'm singing right there, but it's the theme from Police Academy movie when they tricked those cops to go into the Blue Oyster Pub, that gay bar there. So we associated. I didn't know who Blue Oyster Cult was,
Mhm.
so I associated Blue Oyster Cult to Blue Oyster Pub. I'm like, oh my god! And you know how peer pressure is back in high school. I'm like, I don't want to have nothing to do with that. So that was like a very dumb story. I know, but time went by, but we still like didn't want to associate with Blue Oyster Cult. And then one of my friends got into them, but I'm not the kind of guy who, hey Dan, you should listen to this. I like to listen to it by myself, like on my own. So then fast forward to early 2000s, I guess, I bought a greatest hits of Blue Oyster Cult. I'm like, okay, there must be something I'm missing.
Yeah.
But hits didn't speak to me that well for Blue Oyster Cult. So then came the YouTube channel like Contrarians or Sea of Tranquility and all that, and they keep talking about Blue Oyster Cult, how great these guys are. I'm like, I go to my friend, I'm like, okay, give me an album. I need to see what I'm missing. So he suggested that I buy this one first. Well, oh my God. 3 months later, I had the whole discography bought on vinyl.
Yeah.
And even my dad, sometimes when we're like, he'll have supper with me and all that, and he's like, oh my God, he loves and he's over 80, whatever, and his favorite song is Veteran of the Psychic Wars. I still can't believe it. But I listened to this, I was like, wow, okay, now I get it. To me, it's more about the deep cuts regarding Blue Oyster Cult, but this band went from a joke. Again, it wasn't, we were all into hard rock, like Poison, Rat, and stuff like that. This was not in Metal Edge magazine, I guess. But, as you grow older, your tastes mature, I guess. It took me a long while to get out of that Blue Oyster Pub from Police Academy joke. Like that's all these years we associated that to that. So after that, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy the whole thing. And I absolutely love it. Was the best discovery. Well, one of the two best discoveries I did in the past. I'm going to go with 3 years now.
Mhm.
And like within 3 months, I had the whole collection. I just absolutely loved it.
Oh, cool.
That's choice number one for me.
Excellent. Well, that's a good album to start with,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Well,
Well, love the whole thing. It's like,
and it's a good sounding record. A lot of that Blue Oyster Cult stuff sounds kind of muddy, but that one doesn't. I don't know what it is. Is it Sandy Pearlman Productions on some of them? I don't know. But
but yeah,
that one, that's like one of my favorites too. So
it's my
that's a good-
favorite. Maybe it's because I heard it first, but for me, it's all about the deep cuts. Or to me, Blue Oyster Cult, you have to experience it as a whole album. Like the greatest hits did nothing to me, like nothing. And I listened to it and I was like, it was a whole album experience for me that did it. I was like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
And
And sometimes it
took me
just
30
takes
years
time.
to.
No, but it just takes time,
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, David, let's throw it over to you. What's your number two?
Yeah, my number two is the Grateful Dead. Yeah, I mean, again, my parents were really into it when I was younger, and I remember hearing songs like Casey Jones and Friend of the Devil and Chartland and stuff like that. And I was never really too infatuated with the whole hippie thing. Like, it didn't really speak to me when I was a kid, but it just seemed like something I couldn't really relate to. So my dad he actually gave me this CD right here.
The best stuff, yeah.
And I think it was one of those Columbia House orders from the '90s, where they sent a bunch of CDs to the house. So I looked at the album cover with the skeleton, and I thought it had to be pretty good. But when I was like 8 or 9 years old, it just didn't really speak to me at that point. And I remember being like right around there when Jerry Garcia died, and it was a big deal, and my parents were all bummed out. But so I gave it a chance, and then maybe 10 years later, I was in a college class, and I had a professor who was really into them, and he was trying to turn all the kids in the class onto it. So I gave it another chance, and I started to get into it a little bit more. And because it was a religion, language, and music class, so he one of the aspects of the discussion for that particular class was he was like talking about how deeply spiritual Mickey Hart was as a drummer, and the meaning behind what he was playing in the music and everything. So I started to get a little deeper into it. And then maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I got copies of Terrapin Station and Shakedown Street on CD. And those actually, I think I like that version or that era of the band a little more than the earlier stuff. Because I know like albums like American Beauty are considered like the critical classics. But I think the later 70s period is a little more my style, I think. Like and now when I listen to the band now, that's kind of what I reach for. So I like it's not as jammy and it's not as meandering a little bit. The songs are a little more streamlined, so I think that's more my style. But yeah, it took me a while to get into the band, but I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan now, but I definitely appreciate it more than I ever did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm kind of like you. I mean, I've heard of when I was a kid, though. Mm-hmm. You really didn't. Well, where I'm from, you didn't really hear much of Grateful Dead. That kind of happened when I got to OSU. People started to be more into that kind of stuff. When I was in high school, back in the '80s, I don't remember anybody really being into it. I mean, Dan, were there any of your buddies back in high school in that era into that?
Zero. Like I own nothing. The only thing I remember was there was a video where there are a bunch of skeletons playing on a stage. That's it. That's my
remember that.
That's my only Grateful Dead song I know or ever.
I mean, I'm not like a big, huge. I never got to see the Dead. I wish I would have saw them when Jerry was alive to experience it. I mean, I had chances. I had chances to go. Mm-hmm. I just never did. Because I think I think Grateful Dead's more of a live thing. You have to be there. Probably have to be there on acid. I don't know. But you have to be there, experience the people, the vibe, and all that. And I don't think that necessarily translates on record too well. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate them as players and things like that. I don't reach for really any Grateful Dead very often to play, but no, I can appreciate them as musicians. Oh, they're top-notch musicians. So
yeah,
but that I guess I could consider that one of those bands that I heard back in the day in college, and I'm going, I don't get it. I get it now. It doesn't mean it's like I live it or anything, but I can appreciate it,
Yeah,
I've got quite a few CDs, Grateful Dead CDs that I picked up. So there you go. I wouldn't have done that back in the day.
The Dead and Company band about 2015, I think it was, fronted by John Mayer. And I was pretty impressed by that show. He really gets into the music. The relationship that he and Bob Weir have on stage, I think, works really well. So
I was always fascinated. I know we're keeping it loose here, ladies and gentlemen. You listen to that. I don't listen to John Mayer. I don't get that at all.
No,
but it's like easy listening, kind of like, I wouldn't say easy listening, but it's kind of, I don't know. I have to watch what I'm going to say. It's not what I'm into. And the fact that when he goes, he doesn't play anything like he sounds on his solo stuff, but then he goes out and plays with these bands and it's like a different guy.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. Well, that's fine. He's making a living. Hey, at least he's out there playing and making a living doing it. Yeah. So I'm good with that. But yeah, so Dead and Company, you like that?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah, cool. Grateful Dead, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. All right, Dan, what's your number 2?
All right, this one here, how I went by back then was Metal Edge magazine. So anything with a big, page, splash page. So I remember going through it one day and I see this splash page for this. So that's the Back to Blue Murder. So I sure as hell did not know this guy, but this guy looked very familiar. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go buy that. So go on a Tuesday, go buy. I bought it on cassette. And then I remember driving home. I'm like, oh my God, this is not like, again, you have to understand that back then I was hair metal mostly. Okay. I still am, but I ventured there and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So I was like, it's not for me. So I don't remember. I just put it aside. I think I probably even exchanged it with a friend of mine. Then, not even YouTube, I guess, not the Napster, but where you could download videos, whatever, like Emule or whatever. I was downloading a whole bunch of I'm like, oh, Blue Murder, I used to remember them. And then there was a video for, what was that? Valley of the Kings. I was like, wow, that's great. So I bought that CD again. And then Rock Candy Records went and reissued it. So I bought it again for a third time. Now, anybody here remember MySpace days?
I was never on MySpace, but I remember it.
Okay, so I was on it, and this was early internet, so you had people like me, and you had actually rock stars that were on MySpace. And it's not like today where you have to go through somebody else, or it's not really them talking. But there was Tony Franklin was on MySpace. And I remember I was chatting with him because a few rock stars that I was able to chat with. And I told him, I says, I love Blue Murder right now. But as a early teenager, to me, it was too mature. It wasn't sex, rock and roll and drugs. It was a notch more, well, a big notch more than Poison. And I'm not dissing Poison, but you know what I mean? Wow. There, it's like, it's a different level. And then of course I found out who John Sykes was. And now Tony Franklin, I play bass. So he's the reason I actually bought a fretless bass was because of him. And now I can't, like, this album, I love the second one too, Nothing But Trouble. Both of those albums I really love, and I just love the bass playing. And I told Tony, and he goes, I was like, yeah, it wasn't a thing for me. I really didn't appreciate it as a kid, or early teen, I should say. Even one of my friends was like, he's driving back home. He's like, oh my God, what is this? Like, it was too mature right away. And then he's like, yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. And he actually replied to me, and I was like, oh my God. And then I started collecting vinyl. So I went and bought it for a fourth time. So yeah,
is that an original Geffen? Is that the original Geffen pressing back in the day? You never saw that very often.
No. But yeah, I found it at a used store, like by luck there. So
wow.
Yeah. Now my friend's like, I'm like, I'm going to go on a Contrarians and go do this episode. And he goes, oh, then you got to talk about Blue Murder, because we all know about that story of yours. So yeah. So yeah, Blue Murder for me was like it's a breath of fresh air now.
Yeah.
I just did not get it at the time.
Nice.
It was.
Well, it's funny you bring up Tony Franklin. He's out playing with Lou Gramm right now, but he was on the 80s cruise last year. And I literally stood in front of him when he was playing. And I'm going, my God, that's oh my God, it's Tony Franklin. And of course, Lou's band was killer. Tony, brilliant. Absolutely
Mhm.
brilliant. He played fretless and fretted bass on that.
Yeah,
Well,
he
I
does
guess it
have.
depend. It probably depends upon the track or what
Yeah,
song it is. But man, he was.
he's known as the fretless monster, and the sounds that it's a different bass sound totally.
Yeah.
I was like, now I get that bass sound too. It's like way too. But again, I didn't know who John Sykes was,
Hmm.
nor Tony Franklin at the time. Carmen Apiece was the only one that I knew by face, and I don't. And I was trying to remember, like, where the hell did I know that guy from? Is it probably the Ozzy Osbourne video that he's in there? Apart
Uh,
from that,
was in various Rod Stewart videos. Was in.
I was not into Rod Stewart. I
I mean, he's
didn't
played
even
with
have any
so
King
many
Cobra either.
people. Played with
Yeah.
so many people.
Exactly, but I knew like that little mustache there. The what do you call that in English there? But the handlebar, I don't know. But
Yeah.
that whatever he had there, I was like, oh, I know that face. I just that's the only reason I bought it was because of Carmine.
Yeah.
And I gave it a shot, and it took me a good 20 years to appreciate it.
Well, I don't. I've got that CD of it, and it. I will admit, it's not one of those albums or CDs or whatever you want to call it that really captures you right away. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, you have some artists you listen to, they put out a work and you listen to it and it takes time, repeated listenings, and it kind of opens up. I think that's one of those
Well,
type of
there's no
records.
singles really on it. That's probably what was to me. I was what was missing.
Yeah.
That radio catchy song, which is not which is fine. That's fine for not having that.
Hmm.
But there was missing something as a kid.
Yeah.
Now, like I would much rather listen to this than a lot of other stuff that I listened
Yeah.
to back then.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Good
that's my
choice.
choice number two.
Good choice. All right, David, let's throw it over to you. What's
All
your
right.
next one?
Yeah, my next one is King Crimson.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah, I'm really into prog, but when I around the time when I started to get into prog, I was probably like 13 or 14. So this would have been early 2000s. And in the early 2000s, I couldn't really talk about music with any of my friends because no one really listened to what I was listening to. Because I mean, most people just listen to whatever was on the radio. So being into prog at that point, I mean, you were even more of a nerd than I thought I was at the time. So, you know, but yeah, so like I was really into bands like Rush and Genesis and Yes. And like King Crimson was one of those bands that I would go into the record store and I would always see like the cover of In the Court of the Crimson King, and it always intrigued me, but I never actually went out of my way to buy it. But I'm around Buffalo,
Mhm.
so in terms of like radio here, you would never really hear them on the radio. You'd hear maybe 21st Century Schizoid Man once a year, maybe at best. But so that was a band that if you really wanted to learn the catalog, you were going to have to go out of your way to get it. So I would say when I like in my early 20s when I was in college, I decided to like just give it a shot, and I went out and bought the first album, and then I went out and there's so many different unique eras of the band that depending on when you come into it, I mean the lineup changes are frequent, but there's only a few albums that I don't really like as much. So, but when I got albums like Lark's Tongues and Aspic and Red, those are the albums that really, I mean, that's like the complexity of the material, and like so many of those albums, it seemed like they were just reinventing themselves album after album. And I really like the first album. I like Greg Lake sounds great on that album. I like it. Epitaph is a great song. But then when you get to the Red lineup, I mean, Bill Bruford's drumming is amazing, and I just love the heaviness of the album. It's almost like proto metal in a lot of ways. And then later on, like I got the Discipline, Beat, and Three of a Perfect Pair albums finally. Which Three of a Perfect Pair was the hardest one for me to find on vinyl. It's not one that I really saw a lot, so it took me a couple years to track it down. But even then, I feel like at a time when like their contemporary prog bands were kind of going in more pop direction, they kind of incorporated the new wave, but they did it in a progressive way that kind of like made it even more like forward thinking in a lot of ways. And I feel like Robert Fripp, as demanding as he was on a lot of those guys that played with the band that all those times, I feel like Adrian Belew he needed somebody who was able to match his level of weirdness. And I feel like they were just a perfect fit together. That's why you got a lot of those crazy sounds and on all those records.
Oh, I think Belew was perfect for it.
Yeah. So, and I think that over the last few years, I think that's really become my favorite era of the band in a lot of ways. And then even like later albums like Thrack, I like the heaviness of that album with like the double trio lineup. And then when they added Pat Mastelotto to the band, I think that was a different direction. I like that a lot. And then I was able to see them in 2021 where they had all three drummers in front and then everyone else is in the back. And that was amazing.
I saw that tour too, David. I saw it.
It was
phenomenal.
Yeah, that was one of the best shows I've ever seen, like sound wise, I think.
Yeah.
But just yeah.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think that at that show, that was where it really all came together for me, just to be able to see them pull that stuff off live, because they really didn't miss a beat.
No.
So, like, stuff like
Brilliant.
Starlit, yeah, it was pretty amazing. So,
And I noticed
then-
like all the people, like when you saw them live,
Mhm.
people would sit in the audience and just, it wasn't like people just took it all in, because
Yeah.
you can tell like those hardcore Crimson fans are just like, it's like being like at a church.
Yeah, it's
Kinda,
hard to
no, but
explain.
people were
Yeah.
really into it. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's almost like a religious experience for a lot of the guys.
But man, they were so good.
They really are. Yeah, that's
Oh, anyway, go ahead. I love it. I love that whole era. Yeah.
yeah. They've since become one of my favorite bands. Just I feel like every time I put on an album, I get something new from it. Like regardless of which one it is. I mean, there's stuff like Lizard or Islands that I don't go back to as frequently, but there's still a lot of stuff to be gained from that. So, and then when the documentary came out, that gave me more of an insight into Robert Fripp's psyche and just his way of dealing with the band members, and so that was also pretty interesting. And then one funny story is because I was a big ELP fan before I got into Crimson, and when I started out as a music writer, I was still I was a senior in high school, so I was living at home. And this was like in the early days before like Zoom calls or video chats, and I got an email and saying that Greg Lake was going to be available for interviews, but he was in England, so I would have had to. This is when the long distance phone calls were still pretty expensive at the time, and I was living at home. So I remember I went to my dad and I asked him if I could do a long distance interview call with Greg Lake for my website, and my dad said no. So that was my one time I was able
Ouch.
to. I had an opportunity to interview Greg Lake, and then I never got that chance again. And obviously, he died now, so that's like the one interview I missed out on. But yeah, it's a funny story because he just didn't want to pay the long distance charge. But
Man, that would have been great
Yeah.
though, to have
Yeah.
that. But whatever, it is what it is. But
Mhm.
yeah, Greg Lake, brilliant. But yeah, my favorite era of King Crimson is the 80s trilogy, that up there. That
Yeah.
whole era. I think what Adrian Blue brought to the table fit in perfectly.
Mhm.
Adrian Blue could play all kinds of stuff, like the stuff in the Bears. He can play pop. He can do anything. And he's a good singer. I think it was great. And since we're talking about it, you're aware of the whole the Beat project, right?
yes, yeah, I actually have an 8-year-old son, and he's pretty excited about that too now. So
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna. Can you imagine Steve Vai and Adrian Belew together? And of course, you've got Tony Levin. I mean, come on.
yeah,
But Steve Vai and Adrian Belew, and Steve Vai. Here we're on a tangent, gentlemen. Couldn't play. Steve Vai can play anything because he's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Mhm.
Love Steve Vai. Oh, I can hardly wait. I hope they come. I'm in Ohio, so I'm hoping they. Have they announced like the dates yet? I haven't
I
looked.
believe they released the dates this morning. Actually,
Oh,
I saw
okay. I'll go
I
look.
follow Tony Levin on Facebook, and I think he put out a whole schedule.
Okay, good. Man, I have to go because
Yeah.
it's just going to be killer. Oh yeah, I did see it. They're going to be like up in Cleveland, and I think they're going to be playing in Cincinnati. I don't think they're coming through Columbus, but still, whatever.
Yeah,
Highly recommend anybody go see them because I'm sure it'll just be killer. God, I love it. All right, cool. All right, David, awesome. King Crimson. Yeah, but that's not one of those bands. If you're, it takes a time to get into them.
yeah.
Big time.
Big time. And Court of the Crimson King's more of a psychedelic record than
Yeah.
it's not really. Well, I guess you could consider it prog. Depends on what you consider prog.
That's the one I'm familiar with.
But it's a great record.
Yeah.
But that Fripp guy, isn't he the one with doing those stupid videos with his?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yes.
that him? Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I don't know what those are about,
that's
but
stupid.
people
That's
seem to
okay.
like to watch those things.
Yeah.
I don't.
I think they like to see them show a little personality. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Fripp always seems to be so serious, and
yeah, like at the concert, it seemed like it was all business for him. So
oh, it's all business. Sitting there in his suit, playing his Les
Yeah.
Paul or whatever. Just that's all he does. Yeah, that's all right. It's all good. King Crimson, a great mention. All right, Dan, I'm throwing it over to you.
All right. So more. Well, this band is not hair metal. They did a hair metal album. So I'm gonna go back to 1987. We're gonna go with Whitesnake.
Oh yeah,
And I'm like, wow, this is good. Who are these guys? So of course, when you go back to see, and of course, there's these albums, the earlier ones. So I was a huge fan of the 87 one. I remember buying these on a cassette because they were like $1, almost like they were practically giving them away.
Giving them away. Here,
Pretty
please
much,
take
because-
this.
But as a kid, I was like, there's something not like the logo didn't appeal to me. Even the one with the white snake, you know, which one I'm talking about there from Slide It In or.
Yeah.
But I like the song Slide It In, but White Snake, you know, to me it was 87 and on. And then it was until I bought those cassettes, the one that we're giving away, and for Christmas, we used to give each other dumb gifts we don't want anymore. I was giving away those White Snake ones because I gave it a try. I probably listened to them once, and I was like, no, this is not the same White Snake. And then, of course, fast forward another 20 years later, and I'm like, I'm trying to collect, you know, collections. I'm more one of those guys. And I'm like listening to older songs. I'm like, you know what? This is actually pretty good. And now I'm listening more to the older White Snake because I can't stand because I've listened to those ones so much. So yeah, to me, like the old, and even I knew who John Lord was. I knew who all those other guys were, but it just did not click for me. This is going to be a short one for me for this example, but yeah, I'm going to go with White Snake, the earlier one. Sorry, anything before Slide It In, because I did like Slide It In because it was, John Sykes there brought a little heaviness to it there. I'm not super heavy guy, to be honest there, but as a teenager, this did not even close to liking this here. But now, here I am with pretty much I have all their back catalog. I just need to get their newer ones now, like the newer ones. Mm-hmm. But yeah, White Snake, the old stuff did not. It was until I saw the video for here in Canada, it's the equivalent to MTV's Headbangers Ball would be the Canada Pepsi Power Hour, and they had showed a video for Slow and Easy, and I was like, oh my god, that is such a good song, like. And then I went Slide It In, and then I kind of went backwards. But to me, Slide It In was the cutoff that was good to the bad. But now here I am with the older stuff now. So, but it took me a long while to appreciate the older White Snake because it's not the same band. Sonically, it's very Americanized. The 87 and on. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's a
good example though. But they're such a different band though.
I know
there are constant different members in it, you know.
But one was very bluesy, like the 70s and early 80s. Then you had the 87, which was just like hair metal, hard rock. And of course, you listen to Still of the Night, then you listen to Saints and Sinners, and you're like, wow, that's not the same sound at all.
This is not the same band.
No.
Well, by 87, I don't know. Did the record company come to him and go, David, we need your records are been kind of selling, not really, but we really could use a hit. We could really use a hit, and that could have been one of those situations. I don't know. But that 87 album was huge.
Oh, huge here. Huge. But to me, that was a new band.
Yeah.
I did not know any White Snake before that. Then, of course, some people started talking, oh, yeah, I have their album Slide It In. And I'm like, oh, they have more than... To me, it was White Snake and then Slip of the Tongue and then on. But then you start to go to the store and you're like, oh, my God, they have a whole bunch of albums. But the album covers, even Love Hunter, for some reason, did not appeal to me. Should have as a teenage boy there, but... did nothing for me.
It happens.
Just the logo itself was just not screaming hard rock metal. It was just too, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain
I
it.
totally get it. Yeah. It's just the way it is. So, Okay, good. Awesome, Dan. So, David, did you have another one?
Yeah, I have one more.
All right, let's just do one more and then we'll do honorable mentions and I think we'll be good. So, we're right on time, ladies and gentlemen. All right, David, what's your next one?
My next one is Kate Bush.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, she was always like, I think the first time I ever heard her on record was Don't Give Up, the duet from So with Peter Gabriel, which is a great song. It's one of my favorite duets from the era. It's just every time I hear it, it's very poignant in the lyrics and everything, and she does a great job. And I never really went out of my way to look at her solo catalog. She didn't really put out a ton, and she's been kind of reclusive in recent years. She doesn't really make a lot of public appearances, and you don't hear about her. So the chances of her ever touring again are probably slim. But yeah, I mean, she did get inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year finally. So finally, about like 10 years ago, I decided to try and get into the catalog. I didn't really know where to start, so I just picked Hounds of Love because I looked it up and it was like her most commercially successful, I think, at least here in America. So I mean, it was like Running Up That Hill was the big hit from that song, which that's got a great drum track on it. It's cool. But then I think then I got The Dreaming, which is the album she put out before that. To me, I think that might be my favorite album of hers because it's just like her vocal experimentation and a lot of the electronic sounds she was using on that record. It's just really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And her voice didn't really sound like anybody else at that time. And even like today, it doesn't really sound like anything else. So like that's like, and I always find myself going back to those albums and like kind of like hearing new things. Like even her earlier stuff from like the Kick Inside is like her first album is really interesting. Like she definitely got much different as she went along. But yeah, that's one of those catalogs I can finally say that I finally understand it now. So
Yeah, I remember listening to a lot of Kate Bush back in the 80s and stuff, but I got it right away. But God, I probably, David, I played that stuff so much. It's like in my DNA, and I don't really ever play it anymore because you play it so much. Some artists or bands you just play, you don't have to return to it. But I think once she got to what was the record, Red Shoes, I don't think that got such good reviews.
yeah.
But she took a break. I think she had a son and she raised him, and that's why she dropped out. But there is a record that one of her later records that I think Ariel came out in 2005. It's like, she bounced right back. And I think Hounds of Love, Sensual World, both of those records, man, she was on fire. The Dreaming,
Yeah.
Never Forever, I love those. Never Forever, all the way up to Sensual World, I love all those records. Ariel, I haven't heard Director's Cut, but 50 Words for Snow's the last thing she did, and that was 2011. So I don't know if we'll hear anything from Kate or not, but what she has given us is brilliant. Brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Didn't she just chart like last year because of Stranger Things?
Yeah.
She
Running Up the Hill. She had like a hit with that.
I was like, oh my God, that's
1985.
I know.
Those damn kids latched onto it and made it a hit.
Yeah.
But
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm good with it. But Hounds of Love, I think, is probably considered her greatest work. But yeah, it was right in that whole time period. The Fairlight was new. She was doing a lot of sampling. I kind of look at her like, I never really thought about it, but she's almost like the female version of Peter Gabriel to some degree, because some of her stuff's very experimental, very out there, but absolutely brilliant stuff. Anybody listen to this, go listen to some Kate Bush, for crying out loud. Good stuff. All right, cool. David, that's excellent. Excellent. So Dan, you got something else for me?
Yep, I got. So I'm gonna go with Rush. I only had the one album, which was this one here.
And is that what? That's the album that you had?
So my friend, he's a huge Rush fan. Tried all his life to get me into Rush. I was like, no, it's not. It wasn't catchy. It wasn't anything. But then Superconductor came out, and I was like, oh my God! And I don't care who knows it now. This is my favorite Rush record, but because of this album, it actually got me. So I started a year before Neil Peart died, or passed away. Sorry. I started buying all their collection. Like, that was how late I was to the game. But I had this one on cassette. Sorry. And I had a greatest hits. Like, I just love their hits. I went to see them live many times, 3-4 times. Love their shows, love the hits. But then I'm like, okay, there's got to be something I'm missing here. So when, of course, I restarted getting into vinyl, let's go and get Rush's collection, because I saw a few of them. Now I got them all except one. And but yeah, regarding Rush, I did not appreciate the prog section, like, the 70s, from Fly By Night until is it Hemispheres, the one right before
well, it depends
Girl Walking.
what you want to. Permanent Waves.
Yeah, the one right before that. So that little period, Farewell to Kings,
Hemispheres, yeah.
Those ones really, really did not speak to me, like, at all. And then I'm like, I went to the shows, but I'm not a prog guy. Sorry, David. It's but yeah, it took me a good, and again, like I told you, like I don't like to be told, you know, go listen to this, Dan. I'll go to it at my own rhythm usually, and then I started buying the albums. I think after this, when I bought Moving Pictures, I'm like, okay, this is actually very good, and so on and so on. I was like, this is all good. Like there's a few albums that I'm like more than others there, but yeah, that Presto for me was like the first one, and I still love that record. I know most people don't like it, but yeah, the Rush prog era took me a long while. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Rush for a good honorable mention. I was aware of them. I like the hits, but it's like the deep cuts. Nope, couldn't. And right now, like probably my second favorite song is The Body Electric, which nobody likes apparently, but and it's never mentioned. I absolutely love. I remember my friend showing me the video for that. I was like, yeah, whatever. Now it's probably my second favorite song of them of all time, and everybody's like, what, really? So yeah, Rush for me, and it wasn't just, I didn't start buying it because of the Neil Peart passing away. I was just like, it was a good year before, and then when he passed away, I was actually crushed. Like that ruined my whole shift that day at work. I was like, all right, I'm done. It was so actually, I guess I did care more than
you
I
thought.
let on.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rush for me, I liked them, or I should say tolerated them back then, except for that one album. Now I got the whole thing and I love it all.
So in high school, you really didn't play any Rush or anything?
My friend had Presto. He actually begged me, you want to go see Rush live? I'm like, no. And that was at the time where I was starting to go to concerts. 89 was like the first concert I went to, and I was like, no, I don't want to go see that. That band does nothing for me. Even though I absolutely loved Superconductor. I think it was Test for Echo the first time I saw them live.
Okay.
And my friend who loves Rush also had these power metal bands, so he kind of gave up on Rush trying to. So he gave me all these other, you know, how kids, you know, you lend each other tapes or CDs there. He tried with Rush, but it just didn't click for me at the time. Now I can talk to him about it, and 30 years later, and here we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, no one in my immediate circle of friends. Again, it was all hair metal, hard rock. That was all.
I just remember back in high school, there were a lot of people that liked Rush. I mean,
Yeah.
I got turned on to them in middle school when I started. I mean, Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings, those were all. I mean, that's my era. I thought that things started falling apart. Well, Rush is one of those bands. They have never put out a bad record, but they have such a vast catalog, and they go through so many changes and through and grown in so many ways that it's almost where you hit them, where you come into Rush. You know, mine was like 70s. It's where I hit mine. And then, you know, look at you, Presto and all that. It all just depends. And there's a lot of these younger guys that hear them and they'll be going, well, I like, you know, I don't know, Test for Echo or something, you know. I think that's the best Rush.
Well, just to give you an idea how I've heard the name Rush as a kid, and I didn't know how they look like. And then I don't know if you remember USA had the We Are the World.
Uh-huh.
And then Canada had Tears Are Not Enough.
I never knew what they did in Canada.
Oh, okay, well, in Canada we had the Tears Are Not Enough, and then USA for Africa was and Band-Aid was the UK version anyway. So I remember seeing this guy, like I knew everybody except that one guy, which was Geddy Lee. And then a year or a few months later, The Big Money came out, and I was like, oh, that's Rush. Like I said, that was 85-ish, I think, that 84, 85 when that came out. Those songs there, the Feed, Famine Relief. I was like, oh my God. So I knew the name, but it wasn't until 1984, 85, I was like, oh, that's Rush. And I love the song, The Big Money. Like, great song. So, but I was just like, whatever passed on the videos and all that, and then Presto came out, and I was like, okay, that's what I really like. But apparently I'm a very rare.
No, I don't think that there's no right answer. It's just what you like.
No, I know, but a lot of people have given me flack. I was like, on my channel, I did a Rush ranking, and I'm like, you like, that's very ballsy of you to put Rush Presto as your number one. So I was like, well, I like it. What do you want me to? You can't tell me
it's your
my
ranking
or right or wrong. But anyway,
right.
So yeah, Rush for me.
All right. I think we've probably done it. David, do you have any honorable mentions or anything you want to mention before we wrap it up?
Just to piggyback on the Rush thing, I think
Okay.
I was a big Rush fan as a kid, and I was really into all the '70s albums and pretty much everything up to Power Windows. Like that was the album that took me a while to really appreciate.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like it much more now than I did when I was a kid because it didn't have the same vibe to me. I like the heavier stuff, but now when they started incorporating more of the synths and the keyboards and everything. But I mean, now I look back on that album, it's a great record. But when I was like 12 or 13, it was definitely not my thing.
Yeah. Well, that's where I kind of got lost, was at Power Windows, because it was just so the keyboards really didn't bother me, but I never thought that the record sounded all that hot. It was a lot of reverb, and I thought that that's when they were starting to really get commercial sounding, and that's what kind of turned me off. Though now I dig it. I don't have a problem with it. It's not one of the ones I return to all the time. I'm still going to go Permanent Waves or Hemispheres or Fly By Night, anything. But every era is different, you know. But yeah, but I can see what your point is with the Power Windows, because I felt the same way.
But see, I find that makes a band more interesting when they do a little bit of different sounding records or eras. Like everybody knows there's a 70s Rush, there's the 80s Rush, and then I guess 90s and on is pretty much all considered in one block. But there's 3 eras out there. But I don't know. You need to try something new sometimes.
Well, this is what all this is about. These gentlemen talking about experiences, what they didn't care for and what they like now, how your perceptions change, your tastes change. And really, like I said before, we're just trying to turn you on to this stuff. That's all we're trying to do here on this channel. It's always fun to talk music, and it's always fun to turn people on to things. So do you guys have anything you want to promote real quick? Because I know that Dan's got a channel and David has a website. David, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm based out of Buffalo, so my website is called Music and Other Drugs. It's music, the letter N, otherdrugs.com. And I cover like live shows that come through the town, and I also do interviews with bands or anybody who's like putting out records or promoting anything. I just did an interview with Ace Frehley, which is up on the site now.
Nice.
Yeah,
I'll be checking that one out then.
Yeah, we talked about his new record quite a bit. He gets pretty interesting, and he's got a wild personality, so it's definitely a fun read.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Awesome. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Yep. And Dan, you've got YouTube site. What's your...
So, well, it's all because of Contrarians and Scene of Tranquility. I'm like, I keep watching these things. I'm like, I want to do that. And so I created my own a YouTube channel maybe like 2 years ago. It's called Off the Charts. Do some album rankings, but mostly I try to do I do a lot of revisiting forgotten bands. So I try to some people are like, oh, I forgot about those guys, or I never heard about those guys, you know, that band. Thanks for showing me or letting me know about these guys. So yeah, nothing really new out there regarding my YouTube there, but it's called Off the Charts, and check it out if you have the time.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we're trying to turn people onto stuff. Check out David's website and check out Dan's YouTube channel. Based on that, I think we've probably done it, gentlemen. Great discussion. I want to thank both of you guys coming on and joining our Patreon page. That's awesome. Hopefully you'll see more of these gentlemen in the future. There's a lot of great topics. Right now we're getting ready to gear up for April. God knows what we'll have, but there's always content practically coming out every day here on the Contrarians. So check it out. Please like, subscribe if you haven't, and check out these two gentlemen's YouTube and webpage sites. Based on that, let's wrap this dog up. All right, we'll see you, gentlemen. Thank you, and I appreciate it.